All right, let's jump into this. It is 6 o'clock, and we're going to prep for some Dungeons & Dragons. We are prepping our Gothic Horror campaign. It's a homebrew campaign that we're making from scratch. Not even sure if it's going to be 5th edition. We have no idea what's going on. But every week for the past 11 weeks, we've been building this world. So we've got a world map we're working on. We've been fleshing out the races, the religions, the cultures, the people, all that jazz. We were going to work on more of the regions that make up the world. But before we do that, I thought, given that today is the day that, Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft or Domains of Dread or whatever it is, since this book has come out today, here we go. Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. Since it has come out today, I tried to read the whole thing. I did not have time today to read the whole thing, but I did read the areas that I thought would be of interest to what we were working on. And, I mean, it's a pretty good book, to be honest. It's a pretty damn good book. So, yeah. Let's go ahead and take a side trip away from building out the world itself and see what the official Wizards of the Coast Ravenloft Build Your Own Domain of Dread guide has to offer and how that might impact our game. Since we're doing this, I'm also going to, an hour from now, or less than an hour from now, end this stream. I'm going to start another stream where I talk to one or more people from a Discord server about Castlevania from Netflix and how that influenced my decision to even make this campaign in the first place, and how the 4 seasons of the show are sort of influencing the design decisions that I'm making, and also influencing the gameplay decisions that I want to see in the world. The sort of feeling that I want to capture. But this book right here, Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, this was sort of the final catalyst that made me decide, yeah, I really want to do this. I really want to try to run a Gothic horror game. So I started going through and taking notes as I went about the book and things that really stuck out to me as really, really important. Hopefully this isn't too much spoilers for people that haven't purchased the book. I pre-ordered it on D&D Beyond. I have Legendary Access, so it gives all of my players access to the book, which is pretty cool. I'm not going to, go through the entire book on stream, but we'll go over some of the stuff that I felt was relevant to what we're doing. So one of the outstanding races that's still sitting around undesigned is the constructs, right? So this society where they rebuild themselves. So they finalized the Reborn. So the Reborn is, I guess, the closest to an undead race that you're going to get at this point. And they're pretty cool. It takes a lot of stuff from the Undead Rogue that was kicking around in UA for a while, and turns it into an actual race, which is interesting. It plays off the Revenant, which I think was a UA race back in the day that never actually made it into the final game. So basically, it's a little weird. So you're a humanoid, not an undead. You're a humanoid. You're not even dual type, like some of the other races are. You are medium or small. You get to choose what size you are. They no longer call this stuff races or sub-races. These particular ones are all called lineages. So the interesting aspect of lineages is that they can be applied, I guess, to any base race and then modify it accordingly, which is interesting. And then they also reiterate the Tasha's racial build stuff. So everything is a bit more freeform, not locked into the races like they normally are. So, it's interesting. But the Reborn itself, really what we're here for is Deathless Nature, I thought was kind of interesting. You've escaped death, fact represented by the following benefits. You have advantage on saving throws against disease and being poisoned. You have resistance to poison damage. You have advantage on death saving throws, which is pretty hype. You don't need to eat, drink, or breathe. You don't need to sleep, and magic can't put you to sleep. You can finish a long rest in 4 hours if you spend those hours in an inactive, emotionless state, during which you retain consciousness. So, getting some Warforged vibes, hardcore Warforged vibes. They also have this weird ability called Knowledge from the Past, where you can essentially bardically inspire yourself, which is kind of interesting. Basically accessing your previous life or your previous memories or ghost internet. I don't know. And then this was taken, I think, from the earlier UA Revenant, where if you pick like an original race that has a cool speed, you can apply that to your new form. But if you don't pick, the difference here is if you don't pick a race with an unusual speed, you can instead gain any 2 proficiencies of your choice, which is kind of hype. So if you were like an Aarakocra reborn, you'd have a flight speed, but then you wouldn't actually get these 2 bonus skill proficiencies. But if you're like a Tabaxi, you want that climb speed or something. I don't know. It's kind of weird. So I thought that, if we went the D&D route, we could combine some of this reborn aspects with some of the Simic hybrid stuff, and that would start to put us in the right direction as far as a construct-based race, right? So you'd have the core of it would be this Deathless Nature, which is basically just cribbed directly from Warforged, and then we would add in the ability to graft crap to your body, like the Simic hybrid. Yeah. We're building our Gothic Horror campaign, but we're taking a break from actively designing to look at Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft to see how that book would advise us in the building of our stuff. So, all right. So the next interesting thing I found in the book was Dark Gifts. Dark Gifts are right up there with like Theros, Divine Gifts, I guess. Basically, they are level 1 feats that are campaign flavor specific. So, kind of cool. Like Theros, none of them are balanced in any way, shape, or form. They are not balanced against each other. They don't seem to be balanced against feats. Feats themselves aren't balanced. It's just kind of like, man, this would be cool. And that's what we got. So some of them are cooler than others. There's one where you could just teleport a lot, which is kind of amazing. Yeah, Mistwalker. You just teleport a lot, which is so cool. Overall, I think these things are, yeah, 5e balance. Yes. So I think that they're all really cool, and I think that they're all very flavorful. They basically make the implication that every character is kind of a warlock in Ravenloft, is what they're trying to say with this book. They want everyone to take one of these dark gifts at level 1. And they want you to balance your campaign around everyone taking a dark gift at level 1. But they're like, I guess if you don't take a dark gift at level 1, try to get them to take a dark gift during the game. But they also make a big deal about like being a hero and being the light against the darkness, and it's like this had to have been one of the hardest books that they ever wrote at Wizards of the Coast, because they really wanted to just tell you, like, horror is bad and scary, and it's going to make you uncomfortable, and it's going to talk about things that make you uncomfortable. It's going to make you feel horrible. Horror, right? It's going to make you feel horrible. It's bad. It's bad feels. It's going to make you feel bad. That's what horror does. Horror make you feel bad. But they have to balance that against the real world, like, social media atmosphere, right? Like, and they're smart. They're smart about it. Every area of this book, I feel like almost every area of this book, where they could have stepped in it and really, like, upset, like, woke Twitter, for example, they say, wait. Sometimes this is like this, and it could really upset people, so don't do that. Which does kind of bring me to this. At the very beginning of the book, in the introduction section, the first thing they talk about is horror is horrible, and make sure everybody that's playing in your game actually wants to play in a horror game, and make sure you know what people's triggers are, make sure you know what people are comfortable with. They're basically saying, like, if you want to run a horror game, you 100% need to have a session 0. Like, you need to know what everybody's bringing to the table. Everybody needs to be on the same page. Don't even write the adventure until you know what would be okay to put in the adventure, is what they're saying. Or if you have written the adventure, be willing to change or drop things from the adventure so that you don't push people into areas that they don't want to go. Which I thought was really cool. I did not do a session 0 for Tomb of Annihilation. I wrote a player's guide that said, this adventure is a meat grinder, it's really hard, it's a hard adventure, don't play unless you want to play a really hard adventure. And I had people sign up, and then they were upset that the adventure was really hard and it was a meat grinder. I think a session 0 might have helped with that. I would have gotten a better feel, I think, in person for the players and been like, do you really want to play in this? Really? And then maybe had a better idea of what their triggers were and what they weren't. I did find out through gameplay what triggers they had, and I did go and remove those things from the later parts of the game. But this is really good advice from an official product telling people, hey, yeah, like, group composition is important, player consent is important, and when it comes to running a horror game, make sure everybody knows up front what they're getting into and how far they're willing to go. Like, what flavor of horror are you serving, and are they willing to be served that horror? So the book is really good about that, and really good about handling that. But then there's also stuff like, make sure everybody has a dark gift, but also make sure everybody's a hero, kind of thing, which is a little confusing. Neither of the new subclasses was particularly, like, super interesting or appealing. Undead Warlock's been around since the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide, and it's one of the weakest warlocks, I think. College of Spirits is pretty cool, but we're not going to discuss it because it doesn't really have any true relevance to the campaign that we're building. So going further, it talks about genres of horror, which I thought was really interesting. So the genres of horror, they kind of walk you through, like, body horror, cosmic horror, dark fantasy, folk horror, ghost stories, gothic horror, and then other horror genres that we had to throw in at the end. So this really got me thinking, because I was like, oh man, we're calling this whole build series Gothic Horror. So obviously we're a Gothic Horror setting, right? Like, that's what we're trying to build. I wonder what Gothic Horror means according to these guys. And I was surprised, because I felt like maybe we didn't hit the mark there. So body horror is obviously the constructs, right? So in body horror, they are modifying themselves, they're changing themselves, they're doing horrible things to their bodies. And they do a really good job of explaining that body horror can be anything from, you go into a house and the entire house is made out of hands, right? Like some Kingdom Death shit, right? Kingdom Death is huge for body horror. If you're looking for body horror, you can look up Kingdom Death. All the aesthetics, the gameplay, it's all body horror. It's terrifying. And they mention that body horror doesn't have to be gory. It just does horrible things with a body, right? Like a person that's just got holes all over their body, or they have a vagina face, or penis arms. I mean, again, these are all Kingdom Death examples. So yeah, we already have body horror. We have body horror via the constructs and their society and their realm or whatever. One thing that was really cool about the genres of horror section is they actually provide the examples of the monsters are, whatever. But they actually provide these really interesting tables. The tables are all really small, but the tables all have really good suggestions and ideas, like seeds that you could kind of nourish. So, like, what would be a good body horror villain? A house that remembers having tenants and will do anything to regain them. What the fuck? Right? A seething mass of fungi that grows more intelligent with every sapient life it engulfs. And then, of course, the classic, a scientist who, hoping to keep their spouse alive, grafted the spouse onto their own body. Just a bunch of, like, really creepy things. I can't help but wonder if each and every one of these examples is like an old school Ravenloft adventure, because each example that they give could be its own one-shot or adventure all by itself. That's how good I felt that these examples were in the book. And they do a good job with, horrible examples of body horror, and then they do how you could make your setting look the part, right? So not only is this a body horror setting, but here are some examples of what would make it look and feel more like that, along with adventure sites where you could go. It's just really, really good. I thought it was really, really good. They talk about cosmic horror, H.P. Lovecraft. What does that mean? What does it mean to feel insignificant in the cosmos, essentially? Like, that's the greatest fear, of course, is that nihilism, right? The fear that in the end, nothing matters. You don't matter. Humanity doesn't matter. You're just a blip on the infinite timeline of the universe. You're a speck of dust in an infinite galaxy. Honestly, I live every day of my life, I guess, in cosmic horror, so it's not really scary to me anymore. But it does a really good job of explaining it, and it gives some cool examples. Then they get to dark fantasy, and they're basically like, dark fantasy is like fantasy, but it's super fucked up. It's like, okay, that's fair. And then they're like, and honestly, maybe don't play it. It's kind of their takeaway. It's like, try one of the other flavors, because, hey, fam, because dark fantasy, we don't want to say how bad dark fantasy is, but dark fantasy is pretty bad. Like, there's a lot of inappropriate stuff that happens in dark fantasy, and a lot of people use dark fantasy as their gateway to nightmare RPG stories subreddit, right? Like, you tell people that you're running a dark fantasy game, and you kind of feel like, I guess anything goes. Let me dig out the Book of Vile Deeds. Let me really, we're gonna take the gloves off. Anything goes. It's horrible. So they do a good job of, like, addressing that. They never actually explicitly say maybe try a different flavor of horror, but they kind of point out that, like, dark fantasy can get out of hand, and I kind of agree with that. But basically, dark fantasy takes the traditional fantasy tropes and it just makes them the worst case scenarios, right? So, like, the bad guys are so bad, and the good guys really aren't that great either, and everything is just really, really terrible, is sort of the feel from dark fantasy. So then it jumps over to folk horror, and I feel like we have folk horror in the game, right? So we have folk horror in the game via the Fae, and this kind of explores that. I guess a good example of a recent movie would be like Midsummer. I guess it's not that recent, but Midsummer would be like a modern day folk horror, right? They're like a cult, and they worship nature, and they do all these crazy brutal sacrifices and things like that. And then, of course, older and older stuff. Anything from, like, the Witcher series. Witcher series is all about folk horror. That's the kind of flavor that you got there. And then, again, amazing examples are provided of potential villains, potential plot hooks, potential adventure sites. This is some strong stuff in this part of the book. Then you get to ghost stories. Ghost stories, we don't actually have any, I don't think, ghost stories as a theme for our world so far. And it kind of just deals with the classic stories of putting spirits to rest and, getting vengeance on those who wronged you in life and all that good stuff. And then finally, Gothic Horror. And I was like, this is the setting that we're making, is Gothic Horror. What is Gothic Horror according to Wizards of the Coast? So, Gothic Horror is about the terror within, not without. It shatters the illusion of humanity in a poignant way by holding up a mirror to us and saying, look at what we truly are, and look at what we pretend to be. Under the mask of civility, there's depravity. Under that thin veneer of society, there's wickedness. Under all the trappings of sophistication, are we not all predators or prey? Gothic horror stories shatter the ties we trick ourselves into believing, and shows that we, not some distant entity, are and ever shall be the architects of our own doom. The quest for perfection leads us to discover our own imperfections. Our quest for the divine leads us to believe ourselves gods. These are the themes that haunt stories of Gothic horror. And I liked that. I liked that quite a bit. And it definitely reminded me of the Castlevania series that inspired me to try and run an adventure like this in the first place. Without too many spoilers, almost every person on that show was a good guy, but maybe they were also a bad guy. Or you thought they were good, but they were only being good to be bad for some other reason. Or they were so good that they were bad. And I feel like that is something that we do actually have going on in the Gothic horror setting. Particularly with the Justinians, right? The super religious people that live in the northern mountains and all that jazz. They envision themselves as so good and so righteous, yet they're out there witch hunting and controlling their people, controlling their beliefs, controlling what they consume, everything, every aspect of their lives. So I feel like that is there. And then there's a certain amount of Gothic horror with the constructs, in that they believe that through science they can be more than they are, and they believe that they can build a society that is better than any society could be, and they seek perfection, and in seeking perfection they have turned themselves into monsters, essentially. So I really like that. Then there's the neutral territories of Vone, right? And in Vone, it's the same deal, right? Like, these are people that just want a normal life. They just want to survive. But what are they willing to do to survive? So they say that they just want to survive. But how far are they willing to go to survive? Like, will they become monsters to survive? Will they embrace the darkness if it means a better chance of survival? I feel like, yet again, the Gothic horror kind of hits home there. I'm not 100% sure about the flavor of the vampires at this point. Because are the vampires Gothic horror? I guess they kind of are, because they and their followers envision themselves as above mortals, right? And above their neighbors. They feel that their knowledge and power sets them above and beyond others. And of course, in doing that, there is all sorts of trouble that can be had. So I was pretty happy. I was pretty happy to read the Gothic horror and feel like, yeah, we're actually in that ballpark. Also, I've been, skirting the edges of the World of Darkness, and Gothic horror is huge for World of Darkness because it is all about humanity, right? It is all about holding on to your humanity. And everything in that game is either a human-adjacent creature, or was a human and is no longer a human. And yeah, let's see. Vampires are a little cosmic with their power system. I could kind of see that. Yeah, we might be able to throw a little cosmic in there. And put a note. Yeah, so in the world of darkness, you are essentially always chasing after, holding on to, trying not to lose your humanity. Are you a monster? Essentially, like, do you give in to being a monster? And I feel like that is totally what they're talking about with Gothic Horror as well. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of scary shit happening, and there's a lot of terrible things happening all around, but ultimately it is that world trying to impact you and whether or not you give into that, right? um Scales of War is a great example of this. Red Hand of Doom and Scales of War was a D&D campaign that is, the whole theme is a few against many. So you got a small ragtag band of adventurers. They have to protect this region from an unstoppable army. The region is remote. There's no one around to help. It falls on the shoulders of these heroes to get it done. And the odds are so impossible that they are always being just beaten down over and over and over again, just beaten down. And they could start the bravest, strongest heroes in the whole world. And part of that campaign to me was like, how much punishment could they take? How desperate could they become to defeat this enemy army? What were they willing to do? What lines were they willing to cross? When were they willing to become the thing that they were fighting to stop what was coming, right? And that was something that we explored as a group. And by the time they got to Scales of War, which is the higher level part of it, a lot of people in the campaign setting described them as, our monsters that we set upon the monsters of the universe, right? Like they aren't heroes anymore. They are basically these monstrously powerful creatures that we just set upon our enemies. I feel like in a way that's Gothic Horror, right? Because you are trying your best to hold on to what you are and who you are. You're trying to fight that murder hobo vibe. But at what point do you finally decide, my life would just be easier if I killed everything? Like, right? Like Batman and the gun situation, right? Like, at what point do you cross that line and lose who you are to what the world is trying to make you? So yeah, it's really deep, and I like it. I like it quite a bit. So they tell us here that Gothic stories include intense, even exaggerated emotions, romances, rivalries, and life-changing events. Atmosphere and sense of dread are key. Set your story in a decrepit mansion, ruined cathedral, or foreboding location. Gothic heroes are often virtuous, deeply passionate, or courageous. Find ways for adventurers to test characters' beliefs and morality. Gothic villains are unrepentantly evil, but this shouldn't be immediately obvious. Drop hints about your villain's awful secrets before revealing them fully. And sacrifices feature prominently in Gothic stories, give characters heart-wrenching choices that they have to make, aka the BioWare effect. And then they provide, Gothic horror monsters. They're all just basic bitch, classic, monsters. They give some pretty cool examples, but I felt kind of bad because the examples here, they felt so vanilla ice cream compared to the examples they gave for the other types of horror. And I worried, does that mean that like Gothic horror is overplayed? Does that mean Gothic horror is classic horror? Are there just no new ideas left, right? Because all of these just seem like episodes of Castlevania or things that happened in Curse of Strahd. Like all the things that they're presenting here. So I definitely feel like we have our work cut out for us to create adventures in a Gothic horror setting that stick to the Gothic horror theme of holding on to yourself in a horrifying world and a horrifying situation. But also, we're playing with the idea that players will be able to play monstrous characters and creatures who still need to be afraid of things, right? So what are they afraid of? Are they afraid of themselves? Are they afraid of the things in the world? Or is it some combination of those things? So this really got me thinking about a lot of design stuff for the setting. Let's see. The part that makes Vamp Gothic Horror is the fight between using the power as a reason for being better higher being while fighting the hunger and basic instincts of the curse. Yeah, I could see that. Or the vampires have, through study and magic, skirt the edges of cosmic horror. So, like, they're right there at the edge. Yeah. Like, they're right there, Victorian horror at the edge kind of thing. So what is interesting about these genres of horror is, in this book, they provide not like a handful of domains of dread, all these domains of dread. All these domains of dread. That's a lot of different domains of dread that they drop on you, and I was pretty impressed. Yeah, so as an example, the Sea of Sorrows, they basically tell you who the Dark Lord is. They give you flavor for it. They explain some of the top areas in this thing, and then they just kind of let you build it out from there. They don't go crazy with like a full campaign setting for each of these. Some are larger than others, right? And then, but each of the examples they gave, they provide one or more domains that kind of key off of that flavor, which is pretty neat. They also provide information on how to make your own domains of dread, which I thought was pretty cool. So first it starts with the Dark Lord, and then of course it goes with the domains of dread. I thought it was neat that they kind of had like a questionnaire to kind of ask yourself, like, what about this Dark Lord? Like, where was the Dark Lord before the Mist took them? Who was the Dark Lord's family? How is the Dark Lord's family oppressive, or both? What was the Dark Lord's childhood like? Whom did the Dark Lord care about? Who cared about the Dark Lord? Who hurt the Dark Lord? Whose respect or love did the Dark Lord crave? And what did the Dark Lord value? I feel like those are actually really good questions that we probably need to ask about each of the Dreadlords in our own setting that we're building here. And then once you have a better sense of the Dark Lord, you can kind of move on to the domain itself. And remember, the domain is an echoing shadow of the thing that happened to the Dark Lord, right? Because the domain is the Dark Lord's living nightmare, right? They've been taken by the Mist because they're so horrible, and they are trapped in a realm that is their greatest failing, their greatest crime, their greatest evil, right? And unfortunately, due to D&D cosmology, that forms a demiplane, and then people can get stuck in it. Because demiplanes do you like that. So the questions they ask about the domain are so interesting. Because it doesn't say, like, well, what does it look like, right? It says, what does the act sound like from a distance? How does the act or its consequences smell? What colors demand attention from the surrounding decor aftermath? What shapes, symbols, or decorations stand out? I mean, these are really evocative design questions. So, yeah, I'm kind of into this. I'm kind of into using these questions to help us further define the different parts of the world. Yeah, and also, right, these other domains of dread give the short one, and then there is a buttload of actual established ones right here, including the Carnival, which is the Wandering Domain of Wonders, and it is basically just this horrible Pennywise circus situation. And there have been a number of terrifying adventures written specifically for this setting back in 2E. So, yeah. I am excited about digging into the rest of this book over the weekend and hopefully finding some inspiration for our own domains as we go. But with the rest of the time that we have today for designing, because we're only going an hour like we normally do, we're going to take these questions and we're going to use them to kind of build out our Dark Lords and our domains. So last week we hit up the Justinians and Justin's realm and all that jazz. So let me drag this over to here. And we handled the more... how do I put this? We handled the more practical parts of this, like, you know, what are the towns' names, like what are the roads looking like? We built out the map for the area and all that kind of stuff. But in the Nibel territories, what else do we have going on? So in order to answer those questions about the Nibel territories, we probably need to answer these questions. So let's do a new document, and we'll just call it the Nibel territories. Alright, so in the Nibel territories, we know that Justin is the Dark Lord. Alright. So, we ask ourselves these questions. Where was the Dark Lord before the mist took them? Alright. So, I feel like Justin was born into a royal family. Let's see. The prince that was promised. Destiny. Family. And potential. Okay. And who was the Dark Lord's family? Alright, so let's see. Random name generator. Let's see. Noble names. Alright, noble house names. Here we go. Justin Valenford? Justin Sanier? Justin Blackland? Rothward? Let's see. Justin Ergut? No. Justin Durish. Durish is pretty good. Valenwood? Seems kind of elven a little bit. Springsmith? Durish is pretty good. Let's see. Maybe we could find something better, though. Cullens? Is that how you pronounce that?
Collins.
Cullens. Justin Cullens. I feel like Cullens is good, but it's associated with, what, Twilight, right? So we probably don't want to go with that. Windall? Gilwater? Nah, these are all terrible. Blackreath? Nah. Hensmith, Downmere, Rainwood. I kind of just like Durish. I don't know. Durish is pretty good. Copperwind, Jensworth? Jensworth sounds like a family of butlers. Copperwind is too... Oh, wait, is this Justin Nibel of the Nibel territories? Well, shit. I mean, that's kind of some low-hanging fruit there, Dom. But yes, it's pretty good. Alright. Alright, so Nibel family. There we go. Who's Zarba's family? So they were a prominent human dynasty. There we go. On some vanilla-ass prime material world. And, man, typing. Alright. Let's see. How was their family oppressed, oppressive, or both? Okay. Nibel family were zealots of the sun god Phalor? So, some deep D&D lore. Some deep D&D lore. Palor, you can look this up. Palor's actually not a very good deity. Yeah. Palor is, yeah, Palor's got some... There's some stuff going on with Palor. So actually that could be pretty good. We're zealots of the sun god Palor. Their zealotry had the world constantly at war, endless crusades, and unspeakable acts of evil and depravity to non-believers. Alright. Okay. What was the Dark Lord's childhood like? Okay. Justin was raised with one goal, one purpose: to unite the world in the loving belief of the Sun God. Okay. Everything, every resource was spent to put him on and keep him on this path. Don't worry, it's about to get fucking crazy. Whom did the Dark Lord care about? Himself. Let's see. Justin cared only for himself and the Sun God, whom he eventually came to believe he was. Period. Alright. Who cared about the Dark Lord? Alright. Let's see. Everyone cared about Justin. Or at least what Justin represented and what he could achieve. Okay. Who hurt the Dark Lord? Okay, so obviously the Dark Lord's parents and society hurt him by raising him to believe he was not only special, but a divine agent, part of some greater divine plan. Alright, whose respect or love did the Dark Lord crave? Justin craved the love and belief of the people, for after a time he lost the distinction of himself and the Sun God. Ooh, his wife, because wasn't one of the religions about her. You're right. Let's see. Jesus? No. Christians? Lady Christine. There we go. Yeah, good shout out there. Okay. Let's see. So, let's see. Everyone cared about... Okay. His greatest supporter was Lady Christine. A few years older than Justin. She, let's see, was a servant of the Nibel family and charged with his religious and diplomatic training. Over time, their relationship became complicated. Alright. Let's see. Who hurt the Dark Lord? Whose respect? Let's see. Whose respect or love did the Dark Lord crave? What did the Dark Lord value? Alright. Let's see. Dark Lord values obedience and submission. Alright. So, what is the terrible thing that happened, right? That got him his own domain? Alright. It's pretty simple. Justin declared himself the incarnation of the sun god. Let's see. Lady Christine was his high priestess. However, his parents and many of the leaders in his world did not agree with these claims. Justin murdered his own parents and family, crucifying them atop the family estate's walls as an example of what would happen to non-believers. Let's see. He began a campaign of torment, death, forcibly converting all in his path. Alright. In time, these deeds drew the attention of the mists, and he and his followers were taken to the domains of dread. Alright. Later, Lady Christine would come to repent. These actions and actively work against them. But that is a story for another time. Alright. Thank you, predictive text. You want to just write the whole fucking thing for me? That's awesome. Alright. So, within the domain, what does the axe sound like from a distance, or someone in the next room? Okay. These are great questions. I'm actually going to copy pasta these questions, because the first part, I sort of lost track of which questions were which. So what does the axe sound like from a distance, or to someone in the next room? Alright. What does the axe sound like? Let's see. A plaintive scream over a still night or open field. Long, sorrowful, and lingering. Jesus. Okay. How does the act or its consequences smell? Oof. It smells of, I don't know, what is the inside of a person called? Hold on. Awful. There we go. It smells of awful. Of shit. And tears. Let's see. I don't know what tears smell like, but, you know. Ooh, burning. Yeah. Instead of tears, we'll do awful, of shit, and of still burning flesh. What colors demand attention from the surroundings? Okay. White, for its brilliant purity. It's brilliant but fleeting purity. Red for its inevitability. The reminder of penance and punishment. What shapes, symbols, and decorations stand out? So this is where we have to decide, is there something about this religion that kind of stands out? Obviously, like a sun symbol. So sun symbols and iconography. All right. What does the light or darkness reveal? Okay. During the days, there is a very Pleasantville vibe where everyone smiles, worships, and toils for the greater good. At night, out of the gaze of the sun god, brave or foolish folk plot, escape, and insurrection. Yeah. Gold is all right. It's a little classic to do gold. I'm gonna do 2 colors at first, and then I'll come back after the domains are established, because I don't want to like run out of colors. Is the other thing. But red and white, definitely, white mage kind of vibes. So I'm kind of digging that. Obviously, the vampires are going to want red also. Everybody's going to want red. Red's a great color. Let's see. Are there any sudden or subtle movements one's eyes are drawn to? Okay. There is a constant feeling of paranoia, of being found wanting. Let's say people twitch and constantly look about, wondering if their lack of faith is showing, wondering when their time to burn will come. I don't really want to go here. Like, fleshing this out makes me feel really uncomfortable. I don't know if I've got the chops for horror, honestly. I mean, obviously, the 3 hours that I spent trying to play Resident Evil 7 proved to me that I don't have the chops for horror. But I don't even know if I have the chops for writing horror, let alone running a game. I don't know. We're going to learn a lot here. Who is there? Someone is always there. Always watching. Always weighing your deeds. How are they breathing? Heavy and purposeful. Against your neck. A reminder that you are always on the end of passing judgment. Your own breathing is quick and shallow. Worried that finally you have been found wanting. So I guess the overall feel here is insecurity. For sure. What are they thinking and feeling? Yeah, okay. We'll just barrel on down to this one. Insecurity. Will the punishments I deal out one day be dealt to me? Are words spoken? Are they relevant to the scene or unrelated? Let's see. Scripture and worship are on everyone's lips. They are uttered like passphrases and magic words. Where does this take place? Okay. Within city walls. The chosen of the sun are kept safe from the darkness. Let's see. Outside these walls await the temptations of shadow and evil. When the scene is over, what evidence remains? Okay, charred bones. Broken survivors. And the air smelling of charred flesh. Drifting ashes. Before this unfortunate scene happens, what warnings were missed or foreshadowed? Okay. Let's see. Let's see. A mounting sense of self-importance. A slow but steady ascent into self-proclaimed godhood. And an equal measure of descent into madness. All right. Woof. Hey man, the whole reason I played Resident Evil 7 is so that I could get the tall lady to step on me, okay? So I was trying my best to get to Resident Evil 8. I couldn't even make it through 3 hours of Resident Evil 7, so. Alright. I feel like these questions, the Dark Lord questions and the Domain questions, are huge. I think these are really cool, because I feel like I know more about the Nibel territories now than I have, like, the whole time. And that's because the Dark Lord and the act that they committed that brought the domains of dread is the definition of that domain. So yeah, I think that this is going to be invaluable for fleshing out the other worlds, regions of the world, to kind of get that feel. I am the most nervous and curious about how the Tustani region, right, with the vampires is going to turn out. I'm using a NPC that I've used before as the character, so I kind of have a good feel for that that character, but I haven't really explored their potential as a Dread Lord, so that's exciting. Also, we're not 100% sold on who the Dread Lord is going to be for the constructs, so that's a whole thing. Yeah, so wow, very, very exciting. But yeah, it's a great book. I think it's really, if you're not planning to run a horror game, you probably could skip it, honestly. As far as like character build options, I mean, your DM would have to be running a game that has dark gifts for you to have a dark gift. The races, the Dhampir, the Hexblood, and the Reborn, they're both very interesting, but you could probably live without them, I guess. I don't know. Everything else in the book is just, yeah, it's just how to run a good horror game. So if you are interested in a horror game, for sure, otherwise the book's not going to be as useful as some of the other ones that they've released. So, yeah. So what we're going to do is next week, we'll continue building, but we'll use these questions to better define the other domains as we go. So we've still got 3 more domains to do. And that's going to give me enough time, I hope, to read through the World of Darkness stuff so that we could then use that stuff maybe to either augment the 5e rules or we just switch over to the World of Darkness rules. But I kind of want to get a system picked out or something before I go back to the races and start rebuilding them. It would be easiest, of course, to just stick with 5e, but I have a lot of things that I'd like to see in this campaign, and I don't know if 5e is the system that's going to be able to let me see those things. Which is a really great transition, because I'm going to end this stream and then immediately start another stream where I'm going to talk about the 4 seasons of Netflix Castlevania and what kind of impact it had on me and what it made me want to see in a game that I was running. So if you want to stick around for that, we're going to spend an hour talking about the 4 seasons of Castlevania. It's going to be super spoiler heavy. We're going to spoil everything about it. I know the season 4 just came out, so if you haven't got a chance to watch it, we're going to spoil the hell out of it. I won't put it up as an official part of this build series. I'll have it like, I don't know, like 12B, like optional content kind of deal. And then if you watch the Castlevania stuff, you go back and check it out. But a lot of things happened there that made me want to see stuff like that happen in D&D, and I don't think that the 5e rules are going to make that possible. So, let me go ahead and throw up the end and then immediately end it, and then I'll start another stream and we'll talk about it. So, please stick around if you want, because I think there's some really good takeaway from the Netflix show, Castlevania, and what it could mean for a horror game and just a tabletop game in general. But again, if you don't want spoilers, you definitely don't want to be around for that. All right, otherwise, I will see you guys next time.